The Autumn of Terror, 1888, August, September, and November. 5 women died in the hands of a brutal man known as Jack the Ripper. Welcome to my channel on serial killers. Today we will be talking about Jack the Ripper, his crimes, the possible suspects, and his impact on society. Jack the Ripper is still an anonymous criminal who hasn't been found till today. No one knows and knew who he is. He was a criminal who brutally killed women, but didn't stop there and brought out their internal organs. He would send out letters which were written with the blood of the victims. He would send parts of the victims to the police station just to show that he was still out there killing people. Jack the Ripper had 5 victims that were certain. His victims were Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly. These 5 are the most generally accepted victims of Jack the Ripper. They are also known as the canonical victims. The things that the 5 canonical victims had in common were the fact that they were all assumed to be stabbed by something sharp, narrow, and long, something like a knife. All the victims had multiple stabs all over their body. Also, all of them had experienced brutality from the Ripper when he opened their abdomen or cut their body parts out. Most of the victims were in their late 40s except for Mary Kelly, who was in her 20s. All of them were prostitutes, and 4 out of 5 of them were married or divorcees. Overall, a lot of these women had a lot of things in common, so it was easy to spot his crimes due to his brutality and his choice of victims. Jack the Ripper's crimes possibly ended after Mary Kelly's death. People suspect that Mary Kelly was his last victim, but no one is for sure who actually was his last. The Ripper stayed silent after Mary Kelly's death, but his crimes changed the way the society worked back in the Victorian period. The Victorian period was a time when Queen Victoria ruled the country, which was from 1837 to 1901. During that time, England's population was divided into different classes where they had different types of living styles. Some people were wealthy and some weren't. And at that time, England was the strongest country in the world. During the Victorian period, it was so certain that there was a clear division between the rich and the poor. The rich lived on the west end of London, and the poor lived on the east end of London. At that time, the rich were terrified that there would definitely be an uprising that the poor would start. But after the Ripper's murders, the rich were even more scared of what the east side of London would bring to the society. Jack the Ripper became a symbol of the fear that the rich held about the East End. The Ripper was most likely believed to be a doctor because of his accurate yet horrifying ways of cutting the victims' bodies. But doctors weren't the only ones that were accused of these gruesome murders. The accusations were broad, including even the royalty. Prince Albert Victor, the grandson of Queen Victoria, is one of the possible suspects that might have committed the murders. The main cause of this accusation is because of how he killed a woman after he went mad with syphilis, according to his doctor, Dr. Thomas Stowell. Apparently, the woman who was murdered by the prince had her throat slit and had her internal organs brought out, which resembled the ways the Ripper would commit his murders. Also, the prince would often visit places where prostitutes were there. Another suspect was James Kenneth Stephen, who was claimed to be Prince Albert Victor's lover. So apparently, after the prince had died, Stephen had starved himself to death, and that is how much he loved the prince. But Stephen supposedly developed hatred for women after he was rejected by the royal family of his lover, Prince Albert Victor. The most recently suspected Jack the Ripper is a guy named Charles Cross. The series was published in 2012 by Christer Holmgren and Edward Stowe. Charles Cross was one of the key witnesses in the murders. He was the very first person to find the first victim, Mary Nichols. Also, the murders that happened later were near his house and his yard. Sometimes he would also be walking to work when the murders happened. Although Jack the Ripper still hasn't been found, we know the murders he has committed and how horrible and terrifying those murders were. So no matter who he was, no matter what his class was, he is still the most brutal killer of all times who changed the way people look at others. So that concludes our mysterious killer, Jack the Ripper. Bye!